Welcome back to Scouching's 2024 Prospect Pyramid Series, and today we're looking at the Seattle Kraken. What the purpose of this video series is to take a brief overview of an NHL's prospect pipeline and just take a look at who's there and lead into a new season taking the pulse of what an NHL franchise's future might look like. Before we get into the Seattle Kraken, I do want to go over what a prospect is defined as in my work, and what the tiers generally mean in my work as well. So, in terms of what a prospect is, they are players within 5 years of their first year of draft eligibility, and they are players who have not played more than a full NHL season on an NHL roster. So, Matthew Beniers, bye-bye. Shane Wright, still technically considered a prospect. In terms of the tiers, we start at the top with franchise players, who are players you just never ever want to trade, and you keep them as long as you possibly can, come hell or high water. At the core level, we have players that are rounding out those types of players and are really important players on your team that you really don't want to have to move unless you absolutely have to. Then you've got your depth players that are everyday NHL players, second, third, fourth line guys that are there 82 games a year and could be useful. Then you have your maybes, which are players that maybe have high ceilings and a bit of a risk associated with them, or low ceilings and maybe not quite enough to make an NHL roster. And then you just have everybody else. So to get into things right away with Seattle, there's nobody in the franchise tier right now, but there are two players in the core tier. Berkeley Catton is one, and I adore what he brings to the table. He was my number 3 prospect in this year's past draft, and I just love what he brings, and I think he makes everyone around him better, and to me, that's extremely valuable. We also have got Shane Wright in here, and I had Shane Wright in the depth category before, but after watching him with Seattle at the end of this past season, I feel like he's taken some big strides in his game, and this year could be a really big one for him. I think he should hopefully earn a job in the NHL. I think he's riding the line between a core and a depth player as he is now, but I found his end of season play really promising, and hopefully he can carry it forward into next year. In the depth category, we've got a lot of really impressive hockey players here who they've just added over and over again over the years. Guys like Yanni Newman and David Goyette and Julius Miettinen and Nathan Villeneuve bring really well-rounded, interesting games that could carve out roles in the NHL in the second, third, or fourth line of the team. Jagger Firkus has had a phenomenal season, and I think that there's a lot of potential for Firkus to have a really good AHL rookie year and maybe cracking the NHL roster in the future, but with time, I think he'll work his way onto the team full time. I am optimistic about Clark Caswell, so I stuck him in this group as well, even if he is a bit of a long shot. Riker Evans is a player who is in this tier, and I've been a fan of what he's been able to bring to the Kraken this past year. He didn't spend the full season on the team, so he's still eligible for one more year. And we'll see how this season goes for him, whether it's with Coachella Valley or with the Kraken. Carson Raycop earned himself an upgrade into this tier after a fantastic season. He's been traded to the Brampton Steelheads, who look like they might be one of the better teams in the OHL, so I expect his high-flying, high-production style of play to continue in there. Moving down to the maybes category, there are some interesting ones here as well. I will say that Oscar Fisker-Molgaard is really riding the line between depth and maybe. I still think that his physical game might hold him back from an NHL job, and if he's not a top 6 player in the NHL, then I'm not sure he's an NHL player, but I am really optimistic about him, and I thought he had a really good season this past year in Sweden, and I think there's a lot of potential. Edward Chalet was a bit of a perplexing one for me when they drafted him, and I think he does need some time to continue to develop. I found his play with Kitchener kind of underwhelming, but that continues the trend from his draft year, and he's a very smart player, but we'll see what happens with him. In net, I'm a fan of Semyon Vyazavoy, and Kim Saarinen is a pretty good goaltender as well, so I think they have a chance of getting there. Caden Price and Lukas Dragicevic and Ty Nelson are guys that I think have potential, but a bit of a ways to get there, and I'm not totally sold on it. And closing out the tier, they've got Ole Josephson, who I am really high on, but I'm not as high where I can say he definitively should be an NHL player one day, but I hope he develops well and maybe gets there at some point. And then you have everyone else, and again, Seattle's drafted a lot over the last few years, and not everybody can work out, and it's not like any of these players will never play in the NHL. They're just not guys that I'm super high on. I'm interested in guys like Zeb Fjorsfall as maybe depth players down the line, but I'm not totally sure that's going to happen. Victor Ostman was an interesting pickup for them as a free agent from the University of Maine, so we'll see where that goes. Nicholas Koko and Visa Vidempa have been pretty solid over in Finland, especially Nicholas Koko over time, and maybe he develops further. There's just a lot of guys here also who are on the older side of things, who are CHL players that maybe didn't come as far as they probably could. It's just these guys are a bit more of a long shot than the guys I have ahead of them on the pyramid, but time will tell. So the Seattle Kraken are looking pretty good. I mean, considering they're a team team that hasn't been around very long. They've added a lot of picks, and I think they've used a lot of them really, really well. I really don't have much to complain looking back on the Seattle Kraken over the last few years, and I think over time they should round out their roster really, really well with some of these guys. So that's it for the Seattle Kraken breakdown. If you liked it, you can click like and subscribe, or you can go to Scouching.ca, where a subscription gets you all kinds of cool stuff like early access to content, exclusive written work, as well as access to a Discord server and data tables for drafted and undrafted players. Tons of cool stuff going on there, so you can check it out at Scouching.ca. And with that, we close out the Seattle Kraken and we move on to the Washington Capitals, so stay tuned for that.